Today, let's talk about what's going on at the Vatican, and I don't mean the conclave, although it is related to that. I'm going to talk about and share with you my stories of a lot of energetic healing that I've been a part of over the past few days during meditation and journeys at the Vatican, and what I think it means moving forward in this time period that we're in. I will warn you, I didn't write a script, so I'm just sharing from my notes on the journey, so it might be a little bit more chaotic than some of my other videos that I've put out. For me, this started around May 2nd. It was the first journey that I had going to heal the Vatican. And so I sat down to meditate. When I sit down to meditate and there's something that I need to work on energetically, that's not myself, somewhere around the world, it's not uncommon for me to find myself there or to end up with some teaching from another being or dimension. And so I sat down to meditate and I immediately went to my dragon, which is a cosmic heart dragon. So she's very high dimensional. Her name is Ebediah. And the type of dragon that she is comes through as a Taika in their frequency. And so I was like, hello, dear. She's a big golden dragon, wondering what we were going to do, what was happening. And she immediately shows me one of her very large golden eggs. It's kind of a big white egg with a golden radiance around it is how I saw it, and asking me to take it, that it needs to be placed in the Vatican. I immediately had resistance to it that I didn't know that I had. My soul had, or subconscious had resistance to it, where I was like, no, I was supposed to be there to do this, like physically at the Vatican to do this, which was news to me, although I'm aware of the timeline that probably would have ended up there. And I had resistance to it because I was perceiving it as leaving one of her children, which Ebediah is a part of me, so leaving a child behind in the Vatican, which I didn't want to do. And it also showed me that I had some maybe subconscious or energetic woundings around this that I didn't realize. But I sat with it for a little bit and realized, okay, I do need to take this golden egg down to the Vatican because it's going to help with transmutation, shepherding in new consciousness into that area, a lot of healing dragon energy that's at the Vatican, and some other things. So I take this giant golden egg down to the Vatican. I was looking for someone who I sometimes work with during these things because I thought I was supposed to give it to him, which is kind of true, kind of not true. It was more something I was supposed to do on my own. And so I'm wandering around, pushing through my resistance of doing this. And because of this resistance, it probably took a little longer to find the place I was supposed to put it. I was wandering around in circles. Where do I put this egg? I don't want to leave this egg. And then so I put it where it belongs in the Vatican and do some activations, light language, anchoring in the energy, moving it through the space below, above. And that's it. I just left a dragon egg at the Vatican. On May 4th, I did a long journey as part of a meditation community that I'm in, and they were doing a journey around inner earth. The journey I had slightly related to inner earth, but not as much. And I had already been having stuff about the ancient North coming up in my awareness, which is related to this. And by ancient North, I mean what Greeks called Hyperborean. The ancients of the ancients beyond the north wind is what Hyperborea means. Slightly related to this, it's very related to this, but there's a lot more to it than just Hyperborea. So I go into this meditation. The facilitator of this meditation at the beginning is calling in inner earth guardians. And when she mentioned inner earth guardians, I immediately started my journey, didn't wait to be led to wherever we were going. And I'm outside this kind of wall of ice. And there's a being, an ice queen, an ice goddess, an ice being. She looked like an ice queen, which, I mean, I've definitely asked to look like an ice queen when I want to intimidate people astrally, but no big deal. Outside of this vault that's made of ice. And she asked me, can you open this? And I knew it was something I was supposed to open. So I opened the vault and I go in. It's a vault of, at first I thought it was crystals, and she worked on some healing with me, and then she leads me to the far end of the crystal, or the ice crystal cave. And if you've watched Game of Thrones, you know they have the old ways, the old ones. I can't remember exactly what they call them. Should have looked it up before this video. But they have the trees, the beautiful trees with the red leaves, the reddish hue, and the faces inside of the tree of an ancient being, ancient wisdom. And so inside the ice, there was a face like that, a very large face, bigger than my body. And I knew it wasn't a being, but it was more of consciousness. And what I have down, ancient earth consciousness from times before, the true cosmic frequencies, harmonies, and resonance of earth. And she asked me, can you release this? And again, I knew it was something I was supposed to do, something that probably other projections of the lost mother have locked up before for it to survive. And so I said yes. So I placed my hands on it, and that released the energy, the consciousness of this, what was locked away behind the ice. And then I asked her, where am I? Because I assumed I was somewhere in her earth before, and I said, where am I? And she's like, you're in Antarctica. And I said, okay. The next place I went to was Mauritania. There's a location in Mauritania on the west coast of Africa. I'll put up a map and an image that people, researchers, ancient history researchers, sometimes theorize as part of Atlantis. A long time ago, I started opening the records of places that people theorize as Atlantis. This being one of them, which is the Risha structure, Rycat structure, some people say. And when I opened that, I found out it's not necessarily tied to Atlantis, it's much older. So it's a geographic land structure that's shaped in almost like a whirlpool, circular formation, or vortex, it looks like, in the land. And when I opened that record originally a long time ago, I was speaking to the actual land, or the consciousness of that area, which was very old, very wise, and I said, when I shared this, like a wizard. And so I went to Mauritania, underneath the Risha structure. I met a being there that was not Merlin, but looked a little like Merlin, or Gandalf, looked like a wizard. I will say at the beginning of this journey, I also knew that Thoth was guiding me a little bit during this, because I can feel when guides are around, when they enter my energy field. I don't always see them. And I remember asking him, Thoth, what are we doing? At the beginning. And so I was there with this old ancient being underneath the Risha structure. And I also knew that this was a connection point, at one point, an ancient connection point for divine consciousness, energy to enter the earth, connection point for time and space as well. And how some of this energy radiates outward. So for Mauritania and the Risha structure, the energy underneath that, I wrote ancient order. And by order, I don't mean control, like almost a divine order, an innate power of earth, an innate magic. It's pre-Atlantis, pre-Lemuria probably as well, ancient of ancient. And this being said to me, connect the place that knows, being Antarctica, as a place of consciousness, with the place that remembers, with the place that survived, with the place that controls, to heal it. Now we know the place that knows is Antarctica. The place that remembers is Africa, is West Africa specifically. Also, when I was doing my Atlantis journey of opening the record, there is a basilica in the Ivory Coast, which is, I believe, the largest basilica in the world. It's modeled after the Vatican, and it popped into my awareness randomly, as things do when you're supposed to look at them. The way the land is formed, or landscaped, the way the structure is formed, I was just like, why does that remind me of Atlantis? And so I opened the record for it, for Ivory Coast and the Basilica. And I do know, so my perspective of Atlantis is I see it as more of a time period that we talk about. It's a name that we've given. There was an empire that is associated with that name that we've given it, but there are also other communities. There were other communities and civilizations at that time that had different names. But the Ivory Coast was a part of what we associate with Atlantis, that empire, as well as other places along the west coast of Africa, other places in the world. And when that basilica was built, which I believe was 1990s or 1991, subconsciously, unconsciously, maybe consciously, I don't know, they tapped into the frequency of Atlantis to construct this basilica. So this place specifically being the place that remembers. And by remembers, that means a lot of things, but what's important here is what went wrong and how not to do it again. The place that survived is Iceland. And why is it the place that survived? And it's also the land of eyes, not ice. So the place that survived, Iceland, came to me as significant a few months ago. And my guide said not to open the record for it yet, but that it came to me, it's the place that survived. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And that it's the land of eyes. And what does that mean? And my association with it is that Iceland was a piece of land associated with, at one time, a pole, and is a place that survived. It's a piece of a wheel or an eye that survived. So I connected energetically Antarctica, Iceland, the Ivory Coast, with the energy of Mauritania and the Risha structure to the Vatican to bring through healing. Now, Iceland was still sticking out to me, so I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. And I can't share all that I uncovered about it, because some of it's a bit personal, but I sort of put together with this understanding that it's a piece of a wheel that survived. It's also a gate, how I sort of deduced it, a gate of the northern dawn, where the dawn meets the northern wind, an axis point that has been used as a gate and has created sort of a fragment. So if it's the gate of the northern dawn, the northern wind, the northern breath, what's its counterpart in the south? And so when I asked myself that question, I immediately got the answer, which is a place in Brazil that's a little bit forgotten, a little bit lost. It's actually a place that I said if I ever needed to be hard to find, I would move there, and visited. And it's Belém, Brazil, also the island of Marajó, which is at the gate, at the mouth of the Amazon, where the Amazon meets the Atlantic Ocean, forming the Amazon plume. You could look at it as a womb. You could look at it, it's on the dragon line. The Amazon River is a dragon itself. And I also see it as the southern flame that needs to meet the northern breath, the northern dawn, the north wind, to connect. So even before I had identified Belém, I had segmented the globe and wrote, separation, global south. And then when I looked into this more intuitively about how the Vatican, I saw how the Vatican has intentionally separated the global south because it wasn't as easy to control, to make money. They've strategically placed themselves along the grid to have control of both the north and the south. You can think of the north as the toxic mind. You know, I'm more the divine mind and divine body. So the north was easier to control because it's easier to control the mind. And the global south is the wounded body. There's also more money in the north. And it's harder to cut off divine connection from the body than it is from the mind. So that was on the 4th. On May 6th, I went again to the Vatican for healing. And I thought in meditation I was going for my own clearing. I was meditating for my own clearing, and I went to the Vatican and I saw a toxic vortex above the Vatican. So connected to this false lens, false filter that feeds off fragmentation and control, which is what this was doing. I did some healing and transmutation on this. I'm sure others have done so as well. Once I did that, I saw the hand of God, which I've seen before, what I call his big giant hand of God, come down and start help clearing out, cleansing this. And once we did that, that allowed angelic beings, pillar angels, which are big angelic beings of light, massive amounts of light, and guardians of the all, to come through and do more healing. I also did some anchoring of this healing into the earth. At one point I had a big ball of lightning in my hand, which I'm not quite sure what that was serving. It was a charge of this healing, I think, so it could continue this transmutation. And then when I was done, a contract appeared in my hands of the control contract that the Vatican had of power. And then I knew it was expired, voided, and the contract dissolved in my hand. And then I had a new paper in my hand that said, as I read it, the new Pope will shepherd in more healing, more transmuting, will bring the unseen and the unheard that has been hidden up to the conscious awareness more. And I sort of saw who the new Pope would be, but I don't like to make predictions, so I won't. And we'll just see how that turns out. And last night, it took me a while to put together the pieces. Over the past few days, I kept seeing a box, and I didn't know what this box was. Sort of knew it was mine in a way, but I didn't know what it was. And then I was getting the nudge that something else was needed last night, but it was a little bit early. And when I was meditating, I just had different memories from other pieces of the multidimensional self, the multidimensional stories of the lost mother that are important now. Those being chrysanthemum, which I say is my priestess flower, snakes, apples, caves, other things, palaces, other places. Saw a box at the end, and I heard, or had the thought, go back to Byzantium, which I have memories of a life in Byzantine, but Byzantium, not as much, not really. I woke up this morning at, 3:33, probably. I don't know. I laid in bed a while, not realizing what was needed. And then I got like this strong nudge to look at something on my phone. And I saw something that someone else had posted about a cube or a box. I can't remember. And I was like, okay, so there's some box I'm supposed to open. And then I was going back to this Byzantium thing. And so Byzantium is Constantinople. Before it was Constantinople. Constantinople is Istanbul before it was Istanbul. Constantinople being under Byzantine rule, Byzantine Empire, which was an extension of the Roman Empire in the East. Byzantium being a Greek city. So then it clicked a little bit. I had the thought, go back to when you wrote the story instead of being controlled by it. So there are lives of the lost mother, of her projections and aspects that are important to this one now. So when did the ones where the story controlled her start? And that's when you move from deep fear to deep hate. So the fear of being started in Troy, which Troy has a deep connection to the founding of Rome. The hate started in Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire. So when I was getting that I needed to open a box, it wasn't a physical box. It was a healing of a mother wound along the Roman Empire, along the Byzantine Empire, a veiling of women that turned their deep fear into hate, into a deep veil of truth and identity. So I did some energetic work going from Byzantium down through Syria, down through Alexandria, up through Spain, back to Rome, and a lifting of the veil there. So we oftentimes see veils as a representative representation of divinity, of sacredness. And I think if you truly align with that understanding of them, that remembrance of them, then that's beautiful. And then, of course, there's also wearing them for the climate, protection from the element. To me, a veil has always been shown, a physical, the garment, the veil, not just the energetic veil, as a deep restriction, as making feminine power palatable to others, as hiding identity. So many people, in my own experience, an energetic veil around you can be there as part of a witch wound or a visibility wound, but there's also veils along the land that was needed to be lifted and healed in this part of the world. And then there will be others, I'm sure. So it's a veil on the truth, on the hidden mysteries that will be easier to find and understand. The stories may look a little different as we read them again, as we encounter them again, because as the energy changes on Earth, as the resonance is different and restored, the way we resonate with the information, the way we perceive it, the way we're able to read between the lines, connect the dots, or even notice slight changes that we didn't see before, or what we're able to find that we couldn't find before will be there. And so Earth is going through this process of reconnecting her mind, her body, and her heart. And we're in a big stage of cleansing, preparing for that. Later, the southern flame will be connected with the northern breath. But the heart is Rome, is the Vatican, with a false heart that was placed on top of it that needed healing. Has anyone else been working on the Vatican? I'd love to hear it. If you found any of this interesting, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment below. And I'll see you next time.